If you consider the role luck has played in making the affluent wealthy, you may reconsider how much tax they should be paying. Joining us now for more on that, in Ithaca, New York, Robert H. Frank. He's an economist at Cornell University, and we're happy to have you on TVO tonight, Professor Frank. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine, and it's my pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Let's start with this. How do conservatives and liberals differ on how they view the relationship between luck and success?
Well, of course, it's difficult to generalize about anything with groups like that, but let's take a stab by saying that conservatives think all their success is due to skill and effort, and liberals think that much of theirs is due to good fortune. That's an overstatement, obviously, but I think it does capture something about the difference in viewpoints of the two groups.
In which case, let's move to taxes then. Our attitude on taxes, or perhaps more particularly on tax increases, can also be rooted, you suggest, in the relationship between luck and success. How so?
If you think that the things you produced were made strictly as a result of your own hard work and effort, and then you view the government as a hostile force that's coming to confiscate them, it's hard not to react angrily to something like that. If you understand that much of the fruits of your talent and effort were a consequence of investments made by others and cooperative arrangements that amplify your talent and effort, then I think you're much more likely to see that there's ample reason to contribute to the common pool.
Which side of the equation do you think better explains what we're talking about here?
Well, I think you have to acknowledge merit in both points of view. If you think success is due only to luck, I think the temptation for people is to sit back like a cork in a river and wait for good things to happen. If you're too unmindful of the role of luck and success, then I think you're going to be awfully stingy when it comes to creating a decent social safety net for the people who really have been less fortunate.
There's this expression that you use called cognitive framing. What is that?
Well, I think how we react to events in life really depends first and foremost on the cognitive interpretation that we assign to them. In a recent book, I described an episode involving my youngest son when we were on sabbatical in France. He was unjustly accused of having yelled an obscenity at a playground supervisor. The supervisor didn't know who had done it, and so he charged all the kids with the crime just because they were in the same vicinity. My son wanted me to insist that the school conduct a hearing. I asked about it and realized there was no chance they'd do that, but I also learned that nothing happens if you get a disciplinary notice from the school unless you first accumulate 4 of them. So I explained to him that the French justice system in the schools was a little different from ours, but that if you did get 4 notices in a single school year, probably you were guilty of something. And once he started thinking about it that way, he was a lot less angry about it. So I think the way we frame things really does shape how we react to them emotionally.
How old was he when this happened?
Oh, he was a 5th grader. So how old would you be in the 5th grade? 10?
10 years old, yes. Yeah. Were you impressed with his moral indignation at the situation?
Oh, he was absolutely outraged, and I understood it. He was charged with having done something that he hadn't done, but I explained to him that even if they did conduct a careful investigation, there was some chance they'd get it wrong, and there's some chance they'll get it wrong the way they do it. But probably the two systems function about equally well under the circumstances.
Now, this cognitive framing, how does it play into how we react on the issue of taxation, or more particularly tax increases?
Well, I think if you're aware of the fact that without a very well-developed infrastructure all around you, no matter how talented you were, no matter how hard you worked, you wouldn't generate much material success in life. If you're really aware of that, then I think your whole cognitive frame colors a very different emotional reaction to the idea of the government seizing your money by force, which is how many conservatives like to think of it. No, unless we all contribute, and it's necessarily by force, nobody would pay voluntary taxes, then I think we don't have the kind of system that enables people who work hard and are talented to generate a lot of wealth. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Nepal many years ago, and I had a cook who worked for me who was probably the very most talented person I've ever met before or since, and yet he'll never earn more than a bare subsistence level of income, because Nepal, then as now, is the poorest country on earth because it never had made those investments in infrastructure.
If we re-examine the relationship between luck and success, can that change how we view taxation?
I think it's very important to remain mindful that if you do succeed in life, you were very fortunate. You worked hard. Why did you work hard? Because you were born with a temperament or had parents who inculcated in you the cultural value of working hard. That's your good fortune if you end up in that bin rather than in the bin where you had a lazy temperament and weren't taught good values. So I think the whole business of how you think about your good fortune really does color how you feel about your responsibility to others who are less fortunate. Many people end up in dire straits in this life through absolutely no fault of their own. Most of the bankruptcies filed in this country are due to medical misfortune. That's not something that anybody can really avoid. You can eat well and exercise, but even people who do all those things often fall ill and are wiped out financially.
Those facts notwithstanding, do you think that, or based on your experience, do you find that most conservatives who take the "I did this, you didn't build it" approach don't believe that? They think that if you're poor, it's probably because you didn't work hard enough.
Again, it's dangerous to generalize, but you do hear that point of view more often in conservative circles, I think it's safe to say. And the more economists study the labor market, the more evidence accumulates that there really is a very large chance element in success. You can be very talented, you can be very hardworking. Those qualities help you succeed, there's no doubt about that, but you can have full measures of both of those qualities, and tens of millions of people do, and yet fail to achieve any significant material success in this life. So I think it's that insight that I think makes any thoughtful person look back on the success that he or she has achieved with a certain measure of humility. Wow, I was pretty lucky to have gotten the breaks I got. I think when you're looking forward, it's important to hold the fictional view that everything that happens to you is a result of your own hard work going forward. That'll make you work harder than if you think it's up to luck. But looking back, you ought to really try to remember that you got some breaks to get where you got to if you were very successful.
Having said all that, I want to read you an excerpt here from University of Chicago economist Gary Becker, who wrote this last month on his blog. He said, "Economists who support much greater taxes on higher income individuals believe that higher taxes will not much affect how hard these individuals work, their propensity to start businesses, or other kinds of behavior. On the other hand, other economists, including me, believe that high marginal tax rates not only discourage effort and other choices by those being taxed, but also affect the form in which they take their incomes. These adjustments include increases in non-taxable perquisites such as greater use of a company plane, hiring expensive accountants and lawyers to search for loopholes in the tax code, converting income into capital gains when these gains are taxed at lower rates, and investing abroad if the income earned there is taxed at lower rates." Okay, what's your response to his position there?
Yeah, I'll say just at the outset that I'm a great admirer of Gary Becker's. He's right on in a part of what he said. I think we really do have a very strong interest in making the tax code as simple and transparent and non-manipulable as possible. There are ways to do that, and we need desperately to do more of that. What he says about high marginal tax rates, however, doesn't bear any relationship to any evidence that we have on that question. I think what the economics profession generally, and Gary Becker in this instance, fails to take account of is Darwin's central insight that life is graded on the curve. people want to do well. That's the central desire in most people, and doing well is just inescapably a relative concept. How am I doing? People ask that question. They need a frame of reference to even begin to try to answer it. And what we know is that if there's an opportunity to get ahead, that means it's an opportunity to get ahead in relative terms. So if your tax rate goes up and my tax rate goes up, our incentives to get ahead haven't been blunted in any appreciable measure by that fact. Nor, for that matter, if we're wealthy, has our ability to achieve what we'd like to achieve in this world been in any way blunted by that fact. If we're wealthy, we want the things that are in short supply, the things that there aren't enough to go around for everyone. And to get those, we have to outbid one another for access to them. If your tax rate goes up and mine does too, the same apartments with sweeping vistas, the same exclusive marina slips, the same goods that each of us wants will go to the same people as before. So high marginal tax rates, not a worry.
Let's take a real life example from American life here, and that's Bill Gates. Bill Gates got more money than he'll ever need for the rest of his life, and he earned it. He didn't inherit a fortune from his parents. What he has, he earned. But tell us, as you look at it, how did luck factor into his success?
Well, here too, we have a very admirable case study. He's looked back on his success and his tens of billions of dollars that he's accumulated, and he's felt an obligation to give back. He and Melinda Gates, his wife, have started a foundation that has been extremely generous. But he's the first to acknowledge the role that luck played in his success. The Microsoft name owes its luster to the fact that they acquired the disk operating system for IBM computers from a third party, and IBM allowed them to license it for a royalty fee, thinking that the personal computer wasn't going to be any big deal. Except for that one simple contractual stroke of good fortune, we would not, any of us, have heard of Microsoft in all likelihood. Gates is the first to acknowledge that. He's brilliant, he was hardworking, he took risks, he did the things you need to do to make your success happen, but he's also very quick to acknowledge that he was extremely lucky. He grew up in a well-to-do household. He had access to computers growing up. He had deep training in the University of Washington's computer labs. Only a tiny sliver of the population had the background he had that enabled him to take advantage of the opportunities that he made and that came his way.
I get all that, but he you know, as Thomas Jefferson once said, the harder I work, the luckier I get, or words to that effect. At one point,
absolutely.
So Gates has worked hard, and at one point
That's
took
true.
a big risk. He dropped out of college. I guess he gets
He
points
did.
for that, doesn't he?
Full credit for those things, but it would be very easy for him to think that his success was due only to those things. And I think it's to his credit that he seems quite willing and humble about embracing the huge role that luck played in his success story.
Okay, let's go back to 1980 here. As you look at CEO salaries then, they were apparently 42 times larger than the average worker. 30 years later, you go to the year 2001, and that number's not 42, it's now 500. 500 times as much. What forces do you think, outside of their control, created this growth in CEO pay?
Well, there are two main things going on, I think, in that story, Steve. One is that the CEO has vastly more leverage than in the old days. It used to be that CEOs were in charge of companies that served local markets. Those expanded to regional markets, then national ones. Now, most big corporations serve global markets. If you make a mistake in the executive suite, the consequences are much more severe. If you have a good decision that you turn in, the benefits are much larger. So number one is the big increase in leverage, but that's not enough. We know that many CEOs, even in the old days, had enormous leverage. If you made a good decision in the CEO suite at General Motors in the 1940s and 50s, you changed the company's bottom line by tens of millions of dollars, and that was long before we saw executive paydays anything near that big. So the second factor we needed was for there to be an open market for the services of executive talent. It used to be the case that if you wanted to be the CEO of a big company, you had to be promoted from within the company. That's changed now. I think most companies still promote from within, but when they do their search, they also consider outside candidates. RJR Nabisco was headed by Lou Gerstner. He turned them around. IBM took a big gamble at the time, thinking he could turn them around too. He had no experience in the computer industry. Many scoffed at the idea of luring him away with a big salary, but he succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. And now I think the belief has taken root that there's such a thing as general executive talent. And so once there's a spot market for executive talent, you have to bid for your CEO. And that fact, combined with the greater leverage of CEOs, means that the CEO pay has just exploded. Are many of the guesses about how good people will be wrong? Yeah, we've had deep disappointments in some of the CEO hires. But if you're not willing to play the odds based on your estimates of who's the most talented candidate that you could hire, then you're not going to succeed in the long run.
Well, a bit like free agents in baseball, right? I mean, some of them...
Exactly. We didn't see baseball players' salaries begin to explode until the free agency system was vitiated by the courts. That was thrown out in the mid-70s, and it was then and only then that player salaries began to rise rapidly.
So let's finish up on this then. This growth in CEO salaries kind of portrays or it offers us a window into this, what you call winner-take-all society. How disturbed are you by this development?
You know, many people have proposed capping executive pay. That's really not a good way to address the problem of runaway CEO pay. There's runaway pay at the top of every labor market, not just CEOs. And if we cap CEO pay, we'll steer people out of management, and many more of them will become personal injury lawyers or stock sellers. That's not a good move for the economy. Leave pay alone. Let them pay people whatever they think the market forces dictate. If you think people at the top are earning too much, and there's a very strong case that they're earning vastly more than anyone needs, and if you think society needs more resources to rebuild roads and fix bridges, then the simple fix for that problem is just to raise taxes on the top earners a little bit and collect more revenue from them. The top salaries will still be the top salaries, the same as before. The after-tax take from those salaries will be a little smaller, but we won't distort the decisions about who manages which company or who chooses which career. That's the best fix for that problem.
And we'll watch your Congress with interest to see whether they in fact do that in the days ahead. Robert H. Frank from Cornell University, your latest, The Darwin Economy, Liberty, Competition, and the Common Good. Thanks so much for spending this time with us on TVO tonight.
Again, my pleasure.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.